Hey, hello, and how are you? I'm Will Robinson Smith, your host of Old, New, and Now Playing, joining you as we are now past the mark for spoilers being a huge online issue for Avengers Endgame, as dictated by the Russo brothers and Marvel Studios. And so, as we've been warned on social media by Tom Holland and some of the other folks, this Spider-Man Far From Home trailer does contain spoilers for Avengers Endgame, as we've been told. I haven't watched it yet. Obviously, I'm here with you to react to it, give you my thoughts. So this just going off of, what I've been seeing and reading before going into talking about this new trailer with all of you. And just a couple things I want to just throw out there real quickly before we get to the trailer. First of all, we've got a nice new poster for Spider-Man Far From Home. So like the new style here, or at least if this isn't new, it's new to me. So I'm digging it. You know, it's very casual Peter Parker chilling upside down, reading, Map Guide to Italy. But as far as some of the people that are going to be in and working around the movie, a couple things jumped out at me. Number one, we have listed for this movie Michael Keaton, listed again as Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture. So I'll be interested to see if I would be surprised if we saw him in the trailer, but whether his presence in the movie is just him in jail, whether Peter goes back to him, or we see him talking to his daughter Liz from jail, or maybe he breaks out somehow. I don't know. Or if this is just Marvel, reminding us that the Vulture is still in play, maybe setting up for the long game of a Sinister Six. Who knows? But one of the things that I'm looking forward to about this, that I really liked from Spider-Man Homecoming was the writing and just sort of the overall tone of the movie. It has, obviously, a lot of people know that it's influenced by the John Hughes movies of the 80s. And, one of the writers on both Spider-Man Homecoming as well as Spider-Man Far From Home and Ant-Man and the Wasp is a guy named Chris McKenna. Both he and Eric Sommers have written for the show Community, and obviously, as you know, Marvel has pulled a lot over the past several years from the Community world. Obviously, the Russo brothers had a lot of work to do with Community. We saw Yvette Nicole Brown and Ken Jeong both appear in Avengers Endgame, and Chris McKenna, the reason I want to bring him up specifically is because he was one of the writers on a very specific episode of Community that addressed, I believe it was called Remedial Chaos Theory, which, if you're a Community fan, it's probably one of your favorites. It's the one where they're trying to decide who gets the pizza from the door. Abed rolls the dice. It creates, the 6 timelines, including the darkest timeline, which is a reoccurring theme in Community. So that was one of my favorite episodes. So I really like Chris McKenna's work in Community. I like the vibe and the talent that he's brought over into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and so really excited he's back on board, as well as director John Watts, who also directed Spider-Man Homecoming. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive now into this nearly 3-minute trailer we've got for Spider-Man Far From Home. Last time we got a flavor of the world, we got introduced to Mysterio, so very excited to see where we go next. And see if in the trailer they address, I don't know, what comes out of Endgame. Let's take a look.
The Spider-Man Far From Home trailer is about to play, but if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame yet, stop watching, because there's some serious spoilers about to come up. But if you have seen Avengers Endgame, enjoy the trailer.
Warning. If you haven't seen Endgame,
everywhere I go, I see his face. I just really miss him.
Yeah, I miss him too. I don't think Tony would have done what he did if he didn't know that you were going to be here after he was gone.
You gonna be the next Iron Man now?
Well, no, I don't have time. I'm too busy doing your jobs.
Oh, I'm kidding. Look, keep up the good work, because I am going on vacation.
Heads up. Nick Fury's calling you.
I don't really want to talk to Nick
Answer
Fury.
the phone.
Why?
Because if you don't talk to him, then I have to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. You sent Nick Fury to voicemail?
I gotta go.
You do not ghost Nick Fury.
What up, dorks? What's up? We're just talking about the trip.
I'm here in St. Marco Polo's.
Oh, I think MJ really likes me.
That reminds me when I first fell in love.
You're a very difficult person to contact, Spider-Man.
We're gonna come back to that.
This is Mr. Beck.
We could have used someone like you on my world.
Your world?
Beck is from Earth, just not ours. The snap tore a hole in our dimension.
You're saying there's a multiverse?
We have a job to do, and you're coming with us.
Oh, fascinating.
There's gotta be someone else you can use. What about Thor?
Off-world.
Captain Marvel?
Unavailable.
But I'm just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Bitch, please, you've been to space.
What do you want, Peter?
I want to go back on my trip with the girl who I really like and tell her how I feel. MJ, I
am Spider-Man.
No, of course I'm not.
I mean, it's kind of obvious.
You're right, you may not be ready, but this is my responsibility. Saving the world requires sacrifice. Sometimes people die.
Oh my God. I just always feel like I'm putting my friends in danger. The world needs the next Iron Man.
You going to step up or not?
Out of here! Get on the jet! Who are you? I work with Spider-Man.
You work for Spider-Man?
I work with Spider-Man, not for Spider-Man. New plan!
All right. I really like this trailer. So there are a couple things we have to talk about right off the bat. So from the jump, very much owning the fact that the overtone for this movie, Iron Man is no longer with us in this reality. And, you've got, Tony, or you've got Happy Hogan and Peter Parker and really everyone feeling this giant hole, this giant Iron Man shaped hole that Tony Stark has left. And, that's something that Peter's going to be grappling with throughout the entire movie of like, do I step up to try to, fill in that gap that has been left now that Tony Stark is dead, Captain America is older now, and, the rest of the MCU is off kind of doing their own thing. Like, not everyone can come together every time in an Avengers-style fashion, when there's not a Thanos-level threat. And it establishes a couple of interesting things that Endgame didn't really touch on. So, kind of like what we saw in the middle of Endgame, Captain Marvel isn't just going to be hanging out on Earth. She has the rest of the cosmic universe to deal with. Whether that's still shepherding homes for the Skrulls or dealing with whatever else is off Earth. That's like her thing. We'll deal with that in a later movie. Thor is, as we saw him, he's off with the Guardians of the Galaxy, also in the cosmos, or the Asgardians, if that's what they're in fact going to call themselves. Be curious to see, what's up with some of the other terrestrial Avengers, if they're going to address where they are, and that's something going forward that, may come up now and again, because obviously you have Professor Hulk who's around, you have Falcon who's now Captain America, and, all the other Avengers, the Wakandans, everybody is now in play, kind of. But, to see Nick Fury specifically go for Peter Parker to help him combat this, I think is really interesting. Like I thought unless I missed it, they didn't bring in the Vulture into this. But really interesting to see the fact that, in the middle of the trailer, you have this bit where Spider-Man and Mysterio are, talking to each other. And, you get introduced to the idea of, the snap creating like a multiverse. And let's just, pause for a second and just go back and watch this a little bit right here.
This is Mr. Beck.
We could have used someone like you on my world.
Your world?
Beck is from Earth, just not ours. The snap tore a hole in our dimension.
You're saying there's a multiverse?
We have a job to do, and you're coming with us.
So that's really interesting for a couple of reasons, because now we have the idea of, a multiverse in the MCU, which, is different from just having diverging timelines, which it seemed like that issue was kind of taken care of when Captain America returned all the Infinity Stones. But the idea of a multiverse is very, very interesting, because that opens up the possibility if Quentin Beck is from another Earth, then we have a world. I mean, that pretty much opens up the MCU to do literally whatever the heck they want. That means that, you don't have to retcon or reboot any part of the MCU to bring in alternate versions of different characters that have already existed, or different ones that we haven't met yet, a la a Fantastic Four, a la the X-Men. Maybe there is a mutant gene on an alternate world, and somehow some of them are able to cross over into, you know, the Earth that we have established now in the MCU. So there's just like a whole... I almost want to just, you know, go off on a side tangent and talk about that in a separate video. So we're just going to put that in a box to its side, because that's a whole nother discussion that we can rabbit hole down for quite some time. But back to the trailer, you know, I think the changing of the line from the first trailer we saw, where Nick Fury's in the apartment suite saying, you know, so glad to meet you, Spider-Man. That really obviously didn't make sense, because you see Spider-Man, you know, and Nick Fury at Tony Stark's funeral. Odds are, you know, they probably met, if just for very briefly. You know, so nice to see probably what that line is actually going to be in the movie, and that whole interaction. You know, and just thinking about, you know, if there's a Quentin Beck from another, you know, parallel universe, you know, what does that mean? That the Quentin Beck here in the original Earth is also Mysterio, and that he's a bad guy? Or, you know, is Mysterio ever going to be a bad guy in this film? Because we have, obviously, the elementals coming from somewhere. We don't know exactly what is creating that threat here. But the other thing that I really liked that the movie, you know, came out and addressed was the fact that, you know, Peter Parker, you know, he's still a kid, you know, dealing with all these things. But you have, you know, that line from Nick Fury saying right here,
"Bitch, please, you've been to space."
I love that, because one, that's so Sam Jackson, and two, yeah, that brings up a really good point, because, you know, Peter Parker as a character, you know, was thrust into the cosmic dealings, you know, so quickly in Avengers Infinity War, and then came back to Earth having to, you know, immediately fight on the order of Doctor Strange in Avengers Endgame. And so there really wasn't the time for him to deal with the fact that, like, he was just the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, you know, dealt with the events of Civil War, came back, had his own adventures with the Vulture, you know, sort of matured as Spider-Man, but then was immediately thrust into space, battled against Thanos, came back down to Earth, fought against him again, and now life has to go on, you know, and he still wants to just kind of go back to being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But, you know, as Nick Fury is alluding to, you can't go back from that. Like, there is no, they undid a lot of the ramifications of the snap, but you can't go back to before the snap. Like, that is the reality of everything now. So, you know, I'm curious to see what the fallout of that's going to really be like for Peter Parker, you know, dealing with trying to be a kid, his emotions for MJ, and the fact that clearly she knows for some time that he's been Spider-Man, and just, like, hasn't confronted him about it until Peter tries to, you know, put his feelings on the line right there. So I think there's a lot of really cool things that this trailer introduces that gives us things to think about leading into the movie coming out in July, I believe. Yeah, July 2nd. So we've got just a little over 2 months, or a little under 2 months actually, left to wait. So those are my thoughts on the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer number 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Are you as excited for this movie as I am? And what do you think? Who do you think is behind the elementals? And do you think Quentin Beck is actually going to be a villain here, and he's just kind of pulling a fast one on Nick Fury and Peter Parker? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And with that, we are done here. Guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day. My Endgame review is coming very soon. If you are watching it before it drops or watching it after it drops, hope you enjoyed that, or check it out if you haven't already watched it, if you're watching it some point later down the line. So with that, be good to yourself, be good to others, and as always, I will see you next time.